Christian Bale. He dropped over 60 pounds for The Machinist, going from around 180 pounds down to just about 120. That's the kind of commitment that makes dietitians panic. His daily intake reportedly consisted of black coffee, an apple, and a can of tuna. That's fewer than 200 calories a day. He was running on fumes. He also smoked cigarettes constantly, which acted as both an appetite suppressant and a stress reliever. It wasn't just the weight loss. His physical appearance was haunting. His ribs and spine were visible, and his eyes looked deeply sunken. He didn't use makeup to look sick, he actually looked sick. His goal was to appear like someone suffering from extreme insomnia and mental deterioration, and it worked. The most shocking part is that Bale wanted to go even further. He mentioned wanting to drop down to 100 pounds, but the producers had to step in and stop him, worried about permanent damage. He wasn't doing this with medical supervision either. He just kept pushing. He also refused to use any body doubles. Every scene where you see his skeletal frame, that's all him. After filming ended, he had only 6 months to bulk back up for Batman Begins, and somehow, he pulled it off, gaining over 100 pounds of muscle and mass. That swing in weight in such a short time shocked trainers and doctors. His transformation for The Machinist remains one of the most extreme in film history. Heath Ledger. For The Dark Knight, he didn't just play the Joker, he became him. He locked himself in a hotel room for about 6 weeks before filming started. No distractions, no outside contact. He filled notebooks with chaotic thoughts, random phrases, and bizarre sketches, all to develop the Joker's mindset. He experimented with different voices and settled on that eerie, high-pitched tone that was totally different from any Joker before. His vocal inspiration reportedly came from Malcolm McDowell in A Clockwork Orange and Tom Waits during interviews. That voice was completely his creation. No voice coach, just pure trial and error. Heath did all of his own stunts that the studio would allow. He kept pushing the envelope. During the interrogation scene with Batman, he told Christian Bale to really hit him to get a better performance. He was totally committed, even when it got rough. He also stayed in character on set, but not in a way that disrupted production. He was focused, intense, and completely immersed in the role. That chaotic energy wasn't fake, it came from months of preparation and staying in that headspace. He took control of the character's appearance too. The makeup was designed to look like it had been applied by the Joker himself, uneven and smeared. He would lick his lips constantly, which became a part of the character, not originally scripted. Every little detail was deliberate. Ledger's approach wasn't casual, it was strategic, methodical, and built entirely from the ground up. By the way, if you guys want to subscribe, I'm going to start posting a lot here. Thanks. Anyways, Matthew McConaughey. For Dallas Buyers Club, he lost nearly 50 pounds to play Ron Woodroof, dropping from around 180 pounds down to about 135. He did it by sticking to an extremely low-calorie diet, just vegetables, egg whites, and a little bit of fish. He also ran daily to speed up the weight loss. The transformation wasn't supervised in the traditional sense. He kept a log of his food intake and weight changes himself. He aimed to look like someone who had been living with untreated AIDS in the 1980s, and the result was drastic. His face became gaunt, his body skeletal. His physical condition became almost unrecognizable from his usual roles. He didn't stop at weight loss. He researched AIDS, read medical journals, watched interviews with patients, and even spoke with people who had the disease. He wanted the performance to reflect the actual experience, not just the symptoms. He studied how the body moves under stress, how energy drains out of someone with a compromised immune system. He adjusted his posture and speech to match Woodroof's deteriorating condition. McConaughey stayed in character throughout filming. His energy levels were low, but he stayed mentally sharp, using the exhaustion as fuel for his performance. The emotional weight of the role added another layer. He didn't use prosthetics or special effects, every visible change came from his own transformation. He won the Academy Award, but the performance was built on weeks of extreme discipline and complete physical commitment. Charlize Theron. For Monster, she gained around 30 pounds to play Aileen Wuornos, a far cry from the physical transformations usually expected of her. She didn't just bulk up, she completely altered her appearance. She shaved her eyebrows and bleached her hair to match Wuornos' uneven color. She wore false, discolored teeth that matched Wuornos' actual dental structure, adding to the unsettling realism. Her skin was artificially weathered with makeup, giving her a blotchy, sun-damaged look. But the transformation wasn't just cosmetic, it was behavioral. She studied Wuornos' mannerisms through court footage, interviews, and police recordings. Theron mimicked the way she spoke, moved, and held herself. Wuornos had an aggressive defensive posture, always tense and ready to lash out. Theron incorporated that physical energy into every scene, making her look unpredictable and unbalanced. She didn't try to make the character sympathetic, she focused on accuracy, showing the complexity of someone who had lived through years of abuse and trauma. She also adjusted her voice, dropping it to a lower, gruffer tone that was very different from her usual speech. Her vocal work wasn't coached, it came from hours of repetition and practice. She didn't want the audience to see Charlize Theron at all, and they didn't. The transformation was so thorough, people didn't recognize her on screen. She didn't rely on body doubles or tricks. Everything you see is her, gained weight, physical discomfort, and all. That kind of commitment turned what could have been a standard role into one of the most chilling character studies in modern film, Daniel Day-Lewis. For My Left Foot, he stayed in character as Christy Brown the entire time filming. He didn't just play a man with cerebral palsy, he lived as one. He remained in a wheelchair on and off set. Crew members had to push him around, feed him, and even help him use the restroom. He refused to break character. He only used his left foot for everything, just like Brown did, and he trained himself to write and paint with it for real. His physical transformation wasn't about changing weight or appearance, it was about mastering control. He spent weeks observing patients with cerebral palsy in clinics, studying their muscle movements, speech patterns, and behavior. He mimicked the slurred, constricted way of speaking and never broke from it, even between scenes. The crew sometimes found it frustrating, but he believed anything less would compromise the performance. He practiced every day to get the muscle memory right, especially for scenes where Christy types, writes, or lights a cigarette using only his foot. The strain on his body was intense. He developed 2 broken ribs from sitting hunched over in the wheelchair for so long. He even stayed in character during meals, which meant he had to be fed by others. It was all-consuming. He didn't treat the role like an act. He treated it like a lived reality. That obsessive level of immersion is part of why the performance feels so authentic. It wasn't just acting, it was total physical and mental embodiment. Tom Hanks. For Castaway, he went through a massive physical shift that happened in 2 stages. First, he gained about 50 pounds to play Chuck Noland before the plane crash, aiming for a realistic, middle-aged desk job look. Then, after filming those early scenes, production halted for a full year. During that break, he lost over 50 pounds and grew out his hair and beard to look like he'd been stranded on an island for years. He didn't use any prosthetics. The transformation was completely real. He followed a strict diet and exercise routine under medical supervision. The goal wasn't just to lose weight, it was to look malnourished and sunbeaten, like a man surviving on fish and coconuts. His skin became darker and weathered. He avoided the gym look completely, focusing instead on looking like someone barely holding on to life. Beyond the physical shift, Hank studied survival techniques, learning how to spear fish and make fire without tools. He also spent time understanding the psychological effects of isolation. He worked with psychologists to get a sense of how being alone for years would affect someone mentally and emotionally. He didn't want to exaggerate or romanticize the loneliness. Throughout filming, he refused to wear shoes to toughen his feet, even when not on camera. That kind of detail added to the realism. The entire transformation required months of discipline, split over a full year of production. It wasn't just about losing weight, it was about completely inhabiting a man lost to the world. Gary Oldman. For Darkest Hour, he transformed into Winston Churchill so thoroughly that people forgot it was him under the makeup. He didn't gain weight, instead, he wore a specially designed fat suit that mimicked Churchill's body structure. But it wasn't a cheap foam setup. It was handcrafted silicone with detailed skin texture, weighed over 30 pounds, and was engineered to move like real flesh. The makeup process alone took over 4 hours every day, including facial prosthetics that changed his nose, jowls, and even his earlobes. He worked closely with Kazuhiro, a legendary makeup artist, to get every detail exactly right. The prosthetics were built from scratch based on hours of research and historical footage. But the transformation wasn't just visual. Oldman spent months studying Churchill's voice and cadence. He listened to original recordings over and over, sometimes for 6 hours a day. He nailed the tone, deep, gruff, slightly slurred, with a rhythm that matched Churchill's unique speaking style. He didn't settle for mimicry. He memorized Churchill's speeches and practiced them until they came out naturally. He also adopted Churchill's posture, gait, and gestures. Every twitch of the face and hand was intentional. Even off camera, he stayed in character during long shooting days to maintain consistency. The role demanded full physical and vocal control. He carried the weight, literally and metaphorically, and made it believable without turning Churchill into a caricature. The result was a transformation so detailed even Churchill's own descendants praised it as the most authentic portrayal ever filmed. Brendan Fraser. For The Whale, he didn't gain the weight physically. Instead, he wore a custom-designed prosthetic suit that weighed between 50 and 300 pounds, depending on the scene. The team spent 6 hours a day applying the makeup and prosthetics, which included facial appliances, body padding, and a full silicone suit that replicated the texture, weight, and movement of real flesh. The goal wasn't exaggeration, it was realism. Every part of the suit was designed to move naturally, even when he sat or shifted his weight. Fraser worked with movement coaches to understand how someone with severe obesity would walk, breathe, and sit. He studied the effects of limited mobility and learned how to replicate the strain and discomfort. He used a walker between scenes because of the physical toll of wearing the suit. His breathing was slowed intentionally, mimicking respiratory issues associated with extreme weight gain. He also worked with medical professionals and consulted with people living with obesity to portray the character with accuracy and empathy. His voice was lowered and softened to match someone experiencing chronic fatigue and pain. He didn't exaggerate or lean into stereotypes, his goal was authenticity. The set had to be adjusted to accommodate his movements. Furniture was reinforced and blocking was carefully planned to make everything believable. He stayed in the suit for entire shoot days, refusing shortcuts. Fraser described the experience as both physically and emotionally demanding. His transformation wasn't just about appearance, it was about fully stepping into a body and life shaped by suffering. Steve Carell. For Foxcatcher, he completely stepped away from his usual persona. He wore a set of extensive facial prosthetics to transform into John DuPont. The makeup changed his entire look, altering his nose, jawline, and even the shape of his eyes. The prosthetics were subtle but essential, taking about 2 hours to apply each day. They didn't make him unrecognizable by going over the top, they made him eerily convincing. He spent weeks studying DuPont's real speech patterns and body language. DuPont had a nasal, flat voice with a slightly delayed cadence. Carell mimicked that rhythm with precision. He moved slowly, spoke with awkward pauses, and delivered lines in a monotone that matched DuPont's documented behavior. He worked with dialect coaches, but also watched hours of interviews to absorb the real man's tone and tics. His posture was adjusted too. Carell held his shoulders back unnaturally and adopted stiff, calculated movements that made every gesture feel uncomfortable. He avoided all comedy during production, even between takes. He stayed serious and withdrawn to keep the performance consistent. He didn't try to humanize DuPont or turn him into a villain. He focused on realism, presenting someone who was deeply strange, socially disconnected, and emotionally cold. Carell also took on firearms training and wrestling observation sessions to get the background right. It was all tightly controlled. His performance didn't come from exaggeration, it came from restraint. The transformation was chilling because it felt so disturbingly grounded in truth. Robert De Niro. For Raging Bull, he trained like a real boxer for over a year before filming started. He worked directly with Jake LaMotta, the man he was portraying, learning his fighting style and getting into the physical shape of a middleweight champion. He sparred in the ring, trained daily, and eventually became skilled enough that LaMotta said De Niro could have gone pro if he had started younger. The boxing scenes were filmed first when De Niro was in peak athletic condition. Then, he completely reversed course. Production shut down for several months so he could gain weight to play the older, retired version of LaMotta. He went to Italy and packed on over 60 pounds, eating huge portions of pasta, meats, and desserts at every meal. At his heaviest, he reached over 200 pounds. The physical toll was real. He had trouble breathing, walking, and even talking during some scenes. Doctors warned him about the health risks, but he kept going. He didn't use prosthetics for either version of LaMotta. Everything on screen was his own body. He also studied LaMotta's speech patterns and mannerisms, often recording their conversations and playing them back repeatedly. He worked on getting the Bronx accent right and mimicked the pacing and rhythm of LaMotta's voice. He even performed the stand-up routines himself, just like LaMotta did in real life. De Niro's transformation wasn't just about looking like him, it was about becoming him, inside and out with nothing left to chance. Jared Leto. For Chapter 27, he gained over 60 pounds to play Mark David Chapman, the man who murdered John Lennon. He didn't use any prosthetics, every pound was real. He consumed massive quantities of high-fat, high-carb food, often drinking melted ice cream mixed with soy sauce and olive oil to increase his calorie intake. He went from around 145 pounds to over 210. The weight gain happened fast and it caused serious physical issues. His body struggled to adjust. He developed gout during filming, a painful form of arthritis triggered by the drastic change in diet and weight. He had trouble walking and was often in pain on set. Doctors warned him that the sudden weight gain could lead to long-term health problems. He needed a wheelchair at one point because of the pressure on his joints. But he didn't just rely on physical changes, he studied Chapman obsessively, reading interviews, statements, and examining tapes. He mimicked Chapman's soft, flat vocal tone and slow, deliberate way of speaking. He also captured the character's awkward posture and unsettling stillness. He didn't exaggerate any traits. Instead, he focused on how Chapman's detachment came across in real life. He stayed in character throughout the shoot, distancing himself from others on set. He even wrote in a journal as Chapman to maintain the mindset. Leto's transformation for Chapter 27 was built on physical strain, psychological immersion, and a commitment to recreating a deeply disturbing persona without shortcuts. Hilary Swank. For Boys Don't Cry, she cut her hair short, wrapped her chest tightly with ace bandages, and wore prosthetic devices to convincingly portray Brandon Teena, a transgender man. She dropped her body fat down to just 7% through strict diet and exercise. She dressed and lived as a man for a full month before filming began, going out in public using Brandon's identity to test how people reacted. Most didn't suspect anything, which she took as confirmation that her physical and behavioral changes were convincing. She studied Brandon's speech patterns, posture, and the way he interacted socially. She deepened her voice slightly, adopted a more squared stance, and learned to move with a subtle confidence that Brandon had. She also adjusted her breathing and facial expressions to mirror a restrained emotional range, something Brandon used to hide vulnerability. Her transformation wasn't just about appearance, it was about embodying how Brandon existed in a hostile environment. Swank didn't break character on set. She remained in Brandon's mindset and physical stance throughout filming, even off camera. She took no shortcuts, choosing to immerse herself completely in the role. The emotional toll was high. She researched the hate crime in detail and worked closely with the director to ensure the portrayal stayed grounded in reality. Her physical transformation, vocal control, and psychological preparation combined into a performance that was raw and deeply personal. Nothing about it was artificial. It was a full body and full mind commitment to telling Brandon's story truthfully. Natalie Portman. For Black Swan, she trained for over a year before filming to convincingly portray a professional ballet dancer. She lost around 20 pounds to achieve the lean, almost fragile physique required for the role. Her daily routine included up to 8 hours of dance training, swimming, and cross-training. She worked with professional ballet instructors and choreographers to perfect every movement, even down to how she held her fingers. There were no shortcuts. She performed most of the dance sequences herself. She completely changed her diet, eating very little to stay within the strict body requirements of a prima ballerina. The training left her with injuries, including a dislocated rib, a pulled muscle, and bruised feet. She pushed through pain daily to stay within character physically. Her body changed rapidly and the strain was intense. She also studied the psychological toll of ballet. Portman worked with a vocal coach to refine her voice, softening it to match her character's shy, fragile persona. Her posture, eye movements, and breathing were controlled and deliberate to reflect Nina's anxiety and emotional instability. She rehearsed the transformation scenes over and over to make the descent into obsession feel organic. Even off set, she stayed in the mental state of Nina, keeping herself isolated and withdrawn to maintain emotional tension. There was no glamour in the process. Portman's transformation wasn't about beauty, it was about control, fear, and unraveling. Every detail was precise, every movement rehearsed, and the result was a haunting physical and emotional metamorphosis. Eddie Redmayne. For The Theory of Everything, he spent 4 months studying Stephen Hawking's life before filming began. He worked closely with a movement coach and has studied hundreds of hours of footage to capture Hawking's physical deterioration with accuracy. He also met with patients who had amyotrophic lateral sclerosis and consulted with medical experts to understand the progression of the disease and how it affects each muscle group over time. Redmayne practiced each stage of Hawking's condition in order, but the film wasn't shot chronologically. He had to keep a detailed chart tracking the physical condition Hawking would be in during every scene. He trained his body to isolate muscle groups, learning to control small facial twitches and uneven breathing. He would spend hours in front of mirrors, adjusting his posture, gaze, and speech to match the specific stage of Hawking's ALS symptoms. He lost 15 pounds and contorted his spine and limbs during long shoot days, often holding positions that caused real pain. After filming ended, he had to visit a chiropractor regularly to undo the physical strain. He also worked on Hawking's voice, mastering the speech patterns, rhythm, and intonation from the early stages of his life, before switching to miming the famous computerized voice once the character could no longer speak. Redmayne didn't use prosthetics to shape his body. Every visible shift in posture and movement was self-generated. The performance was built on precision, control, and an obsessive attention to physical and emotional detail that made the transformation fully believable. Jaime Fox. For Ray, he went through an intense physical and psychological transformation to portray Ray Charles. He wore prosthetic eyelids glued shut for up to 14 hours a day during filming. That meant he was actually blind throughout production. Crew members had to guide him around the set, and he learned to navigate scenes by counting steps and using muscle memory. He also lost around 30 pounds to match Ray Charles' slim build during his younger years. Fox studied Charles' movements and mannerisms by watching countless performances and interviews. He mimicked the way Charles tilted his head, shifted his body while seated at the piano, and moved his hands. His posture changed, and he adopted the musician's subtle but constant rhythmic energy. He trained with a dialect coach to master Charles's unique way of speaking, including his southern drawl, speech patterns, and vocal inflections. He already played piano, but Fox went deeper. He trained for hours every day to replicate Charles's playing style, finger movements, and even mistakes. He refused to fake it. He played live during many scenes and worked closely with Ray Charles before the musician passed away. That mentorship helped Fox understand not just the music, but the man. He stayed in character offset, maintaining the blind posture and behaviors to stay locked in. He didn't treat it like an impersonation. He approached it as a full embodiment. Every expression, gesture, and note was shaped by months of meticulous preparation. The transformation wasn't just accurate, it was immersive and disciplined. Tilda Swinton. For Suspiria, she didn't just play one role, she played three, including the elderly male psychiatrist Dr. Joseph Klemperer. To transform into Klemperer, she wore extensive prosthetics that took over 4 hours a day to apply. The process included full facial applications, neck and hand prosthetics, and a full-body silicone suit that gave her the posture and weight of an 82-year-old man. She also wore custom dentures and contact lenses to alter her eye color and shape. She worked with voice coaches to develop a deep, gravelly tone completely different from her natural voice. She adjusted her breathing, slowed her speech, and added subtle vocal hesitations to match the character's age and emotional state. She even added a slight tremor in her hands and a careful, deliberate walking pattern that reflected physical frailty and age-related stiffness. Swinton went beyond physical transformation. She studied the psychological trauma of Holocaust survivors and the behavioral patterns of aging men who lived through war and loss. Her portrayal wasn't just about makeup, it was layered with emotion, restraint, and weariness. She stayed in character on set, not breaking the illusion, and even insisted on being credited under a fictional name to keep the transformation a secret during the film's release. The performance was so convincing that many audience members didn't realize it was her under the prosthetics. She didn't just play an old man, she became one, physically and psychologically, with a level of detail that blurred the line between actor and character. Joaquin Phoenix. This marks the second time the Joker appears in this video, but Phoenix's transformation in Joker was entirely his own. He lost over 50 pounds in just a few months, dropping to about 125 pounds through a medically supervised diet. The extreme weight loss gave him a gaunt appearance with sharp facial features and protruding ribs, which he used deliberately in his physical performance. His movements became more angular and unsettling, with his spine visible in certain scenes and his shoulder blades jutting out like bones under tension. He choreographed his own dances, drawing inspiration from vintage cabaret performers and studying videos of people with neurological disorders to build a physical language that was unpredictable and awkward. He also practiced laughing for hours each day to create a distinct version of the Joker's laugh, one that was involuntary, painful, and deeply unnatural. He based it on real-life conditions like pathological laughter, where emotional expression doesn't match internal feelings. Phoenix kept a journal in character, filling it with disturbing thoughts, jokes, and sketches to maintain the mental state of Arthur Fleck. He stayed socially distant on set, often retreating between scenes to stay in character. He didn't try to copy any past versions of the Joker. His goal was to present a man deteriorating psychologically in a world that keeps pushing him down. His transformation was grounded in realism, focused on vulnerability and instability, and built entirely on precise, uncomfortable choices that left nothing to chance. Nicole Kidman. For the hours, she underwent a striking transformation to play Virginia Woolf, and it started with a prosthetic nose. The piece reshaped her face to mirror Woolf's distinct features, and took about 2 hours to apply each day. It wasn't exaggerated, it was subtle, but it altered her expression completely. She also wore minimal makeup to match Woolf's pale, natural look, and donned a wig styled precisely to the period, and her physical transformation didn't end with appearance. She adopted Woolf's posture, body language, and slow, deliberate movements. She studied Woolf's personal writings, diaries, and letters to understand her mental state. Kidman focused on portraying the inner turmoil Woolf experienced while struggling with depression and auditory hallucinations. She practiced moving with tension and hesitation, reflecting Woolf's anxiety and discomfort with the world around her. She also worked on voice changes, softening her Australian accent into a controlled, upper-class English tone that matched Woolf's background. Her vocal delivery became measured, slightly stilted, and emotionally restrained, matching how Woolf spoke in historical recordings. Kidman stayed in character even between takes, often isolating herself to stay in Woolf's mindset. She didn't engage with other cast members during breaks and maintained a somber demeanor throughout the shoot. The goal wasn't imitation, it was immersion. Her transformation was quiet, controlled, and rooted in psychological depth rather than theatricality. It didn't scream for attention, but it changed her entirely, to the point that audiences often forgot they were watching Nicole Kidman at all. Chris Hemsworth. For In the Heart of the Sea, he had to drop his superhero build and lose over 30 pounds to play a starving sailor stranded at sea. He started with an already lean frame and then followed a crash diet of just 500 to 600 calories per day. His meals included boiled eggs, a couple of crackers, and occasional celery. The weight loss was fast and brutal. He trained while eating next to nothing, which left him exhausted and visibly weaker during filming. The physical change was necessary to portray the crew's descent into starvation after a whaling ship disaster. Hemsworth's face became hollow, his limbs thin, and his body looked completely worn down. He didn't use prosthetics or effects. Every visible change came from real weight loss and daily calorie control. His energy dropped, and he used that drained state to reflect the character's desperation and mental fatigue. He also worked with movement coaches to adjust his posture and breathing to mimic the slow, labored actions of someone suffering from extreme malnourishment. His usual powerful presence was gone, replaced with cautious, sluggish motion and vacant expressions. Filming at sea added another layer of realism. Cold temperatures, rocking boats, and real ocean elements intensified the experience. He didn't break diet or character during the shoot, pushing through hunger to keep the transformation intact. It was a stripped-down, harsh performance. There was no glamour, no tricks, just a relentless physical descent that matched the brutal survival story being told. Chris Pratt. For Guardians of the Galaxy, he dropped around 60 pounds in just 6 months to transform from sitcom sidekick to action lead. He went from roughly 280 pounds down to around 220 by sticking to a strict high-protein, low-carb diet and training multiple times a day. His regimen included intense cardio, swimming, boxing, and heavy weightlifting, all overseen by a professional trainer and nutritionist. He gave up alcohol completely during the process to accelerate fat loss and build muscle faster. The transformation wasn't just about slimming down, it was about looking like a superhero. He trained specifically for strength and definition, aiming for the kind of physique that could convincingly carry off stunts, combat scenes, and shirtless moments without special effects or body doubles. His training was relentless, sometimes running 5 miles in the morning before hitting the gym again in the evening. Pratt also adjusted his posture and physical presence. He went from slouched and goofy to upright and commanding, with a confident swagger that matched the character's cocky tone. His voice changed slightly too. He trained to speak with more authority and energy, ditching the awkward delivery that defined his earlier roles. He didn't rely on digital help or padded suits. Every visible result came from disciplined effort and months of intense work. The shift was so complete it surprised audiences used to his comedic roles. His transformation wasn't just a fitness story, it was a total redefinition of how he was seen on screen. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.